to become a Christian. I've called this message received, and I'll explain what that is. We look at how the call to come to God is received by people, and then next week we look at how people respond to that call. So we're really breaking down how this message of God comes to people. Firstly, how it's received, and there is a little bit of overlap. We can't help but look at responses to some degree, but mostly concentrating on the received message, and then next week look at the reply, as it were, the response that we have. And so last week we looked at the call itself, the general call to all people, the salvation call that came through Jesus Christ, and this week we dig a little bit deeper into how that call is received by a person. For believers and non-believers, I hope this helps us to understand how the message of God's existence is one of the core building blocks in how God created us. But I also want this to have maybe a slightly different application. And whilst we learn about this message, I want the application today to be about how we evangelize as Christians, how I think it's best to approach people when an opportunity to share the gospel is presented. So I hope we'll learn something. I've certainly learned this over the last few weeks to be a bit more specific about how we evangelize, and I think it's a useful method, a useful way that we both bless people, but we obviously don't shy away from the truth. So I hope that will help as well. So let's get straight into it. We need to understand, how is God's existence imprinted on us by God himself? We've looked at these verses before, not so long ago, but Genesis 1:26-27 says, then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. You see, what God did was God endowed humans with a certain kind of awareness, one which animals, birds, fishes were not given. Humans would possess this capacity, have this capacity for reason, capacity for morality, the right and wrong of what we see, language, personality. Everyone is different. Everyone has a different character. And of course, different purposes in this life. And so what God does, God gives mankind the responsibility then to rule over all other life he's made on the earth. And in that sense, humans would stand as God's image, God's representatives on earth as we rule over and manage all the rest of his creation, despite, as I often say, maybe how badly we do it. But he has given us this responsibility to look after something so precious to him, which is not only us, but everything that he has created. But all this means, to begin with, is that we intrinsically know, whether we want to admit it or not, that we as humans and the world we live in has been created by God, and that he therefore exists as fact, as truth. Romans 1, we've done this verse before, but it's really helpful in this context, 19-20, since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, eternal power, divine nature have been clearly seen, been understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. And so even with this, many people I've found will say that they need to see God do something in order to know that he exists. They need to see a display of God's power in front of them to know that he exists. They need some proof to believe that he's actually there. There is an apologist in the US who sort of watch clips of him really, but what I've watched certainly whole sessions that he's done. Really good work in showing how God does exist, and he uses good facts, solid facts. There's no kind of highly super spiritual stuff in that sense. He does do that, but he's there with the facts all the time. Knowledge about the universe. He talks about science behind the universe, which is just fantastic how he brings it together, and then how everything came to be. And this guy's name is Frank Turek. He's been doing it for years and years, long time. But he goes around the US doing these Q&A sessions. And the one thing that that he does as a kind of style that you know this is what he does. The end of every session, there's a question. And after he's given the answer to the question they ask, they do his Q&A, and he says to the person at the very end of this kind of interaction, he says, if Christianity then was proven to be true beyond doubt, he said, let's just assume that Christianity was proven 100%, you could not refute it. He says, would you believe it? And the answer that seems to come back again and again is probably. And then they start adding caveats. Probably. I mean, if the evidence was beyond doubt, it had to be beyond doubt. But the reason why I think this response happens and why it comes back is the assumption that they must see something in order that God prove himself exists. And what he does, quite rightly, is that he says, well, he's already done that. And he keeps doing it by sustaining us now. We only live because God sustains us right now. He sustains the believer and the unbeliever even now. But the reason people have that response, I think, is because of how people receive the truth that God already exists. God says, you already know I exist. You already know, because not only is it apparent around you, but I made you. And I made you in my image, so part of what you're made of is me, but not. I mean, let's just be clear, we're not gods, okay? We're not God in any way whatsoever, but we're made by God himself. So he says, you already know I exist. You have life. You live in the very world that's created around you. And then you always go to this psalm because it's really helpful, because it connects nicely with a declaration by somebody. Psalm 19:1-6, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens he's pitched the tent for the sun, which is like a bridegroom coming forth from his pavilion, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is hidden from his heat. Just to say, really, in all of that language, God made everything. God sustains all those things. He created the very thing that is proclaiming his name, the very creation itself. So it's not really, and I think this is probably true, it's not really that anyone needs 100% proof. For if we think of crimes, we don't convict people on 100% proof because there's no such thing as 100% proof. Juries take in the information and they decide, and slowly over time, I've been on a couple of duties, and we had one where it didn't end in any thing, and it had to be stopped, but we couldn't come to a conclusion. And even the judge lowered it. It was 12 of us. It lowered it to 10, and he said, if 10 of you agree, and therefore I'll accept 10 if you can all agree. We couldn't agree. But you see what I'm saying? There's not 100% proof, and even so, we can convict somebody on not 100% of a jury either. So it can't be that we need 100% proof. Otherwise, we'll be up in arms all the time about anyone being convicted of any crime whatsoever and say, we need 100% proof, yet we're so quick when just a tiny piece of evidence is presented to say they must be guilty. They must be guilty. So I think there is a contradiction. But what we struggle to admit is that we know God exists. We know he exists. And as a result, as soon as we hear that truth, as Romans says, we suppress it. You see, God, when he made the heavens and the earth, in a way he says the creation around us is this message I sent you. It's not like as if you can close your eyes to it. It's not only what you can see with your eyes, the very breath that you take is created by God himself. The oxygen that's in the air is created by God himself. And this message explains everything. But to live in that very evidence, to live now, right now, in this very evidence of God, the very creative reality around us, and then deny it is to suppress what is clear and so have no excuse. Acts 17:24-28 says, the God who made the world, just make sure my mic was on, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the times set for them and exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him, perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. We need to be clear. I said last week, and I do say this often, having knowledge of the existence of God is not enough. Knowledge of God will not save us from the consequences of sin. It will not save us from hell. Having knowledge is not enough. So we need to be clear that God is not simply stating a fact that he made the universe and everything in it, although it is true. But within that message is a much bigger message. It's a message of purpose. That although we suppress what is clear and evident to us, the message that we wake up with to every day is creation itself. And he does this so that people would seek him, reach out for him, and find him. Isn't that a gracious God? He says, I have every right to condemn every single person on this planet. He says, but I created the heavens and the earth, and I'm not going to force you even to believe in me. I'm going to present you with who I am. I'm going to present you with this amazing so-called lucky coincidence, by the way, of any part of the creation being slightly out by a millisecond or slightly out by a unit of anything, that none of this would be here today. So he creates all this amazing, complicated, technical universe. And he says, I did that so you would see and so hope that you find me and come and seek me. And so this message is the truth of hope. This is a God who wants all to respond to the message that has been clearly received. And I think of my own journey to faith. We all have these different experiences, as I said last week, but in that experience we're faced with the same truth. You see, we didn't come to our own version of what was true. This is the big difference with Christianity. You cannot come as a believer and say, I'm going to have my own version of what a believer is. You have to take the Bible, and that has to be the truth that you accept. Otherwise, it is not a belief in a holy God in the Christian Bible. It is not a belief of a holy God at all. Instead, we came to the conclusion and conviction that what we believed to be true was actually not true. And embraced that which was true and was always true, which was that God is everything. God is the creator of all things. God is my Father. God is my Lord. And yet I wanted to not do that. I wanted to say no. I want my own truth. John 9:35-41, Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world so that the blind will see and those who see will become blind. It's the right one, isn't it? Yeah. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what, are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. We were those people who thought we could see. but were actually blind. We were arrogant and presumed our own understanding was true. Even when people engage with this message of a God that exists, many struggle to move from knowledge to belief. John 5:39-40 says, "You diligently study the scriptures because you think that by them you possess eternal life. These are the scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me to have life." You see, again, we're obsessed as a human race to gather so much knowledge and yet not see where it's leading us to. In the case of the Bible, in the case of God's word, this particular one is not just a bunch of history. It's not just a bunch of knowledge. It is knowledge that should lead us to give our life to Jesus. So why do people ultimately struggle to fully receive the message of the gospel? To move from a message received to a message acknowledged. We can say it's suppression, of course, but what does that really mean? Now, bear with me. I'm going to use an analogy that will probably go on for the rest of this sermon, and I need you to stick with me. And some of it will fall apart in your mind, and you'll think that doesn't hold together. But the best way I can do is I've gone over this probably a few times. That's probably the best I can do to convey what I think is how people build their worldview. And so I want us to understand this. Imagine this, that some of you have heard me say recently, I think, in this concept, but you have a plot of land, and on that plot of land you build a house. And in the process of building your house, you see how the foundation is built and how that house is supported by those foundations. And then you put the decoration in, you decide how you wanted to configure the house and the rooms. You put in furniture, you put up pictures, and you place everything in the place that you wanted it. Now, you live in this house for most of your life, and you know it inside out. You've fixed it and you've patched it up, redecorated it 100 times. You know this house. You see, when it comes to how people see the world, this house analogy is how people develop a view of the world. You see, within my house, as it were, I'm safe. I feel okay. I can go out of my house into the world, and I can be bombarded with all sorts of other belief systems and all sorts of other things I disagree with, but I can always come back to my house. I can always feel safe in my house because the house is familiar. I've built over years all these things that feel safe, and it's almost like a fortification, like I can go in and say, close the door, the world is out there, I'm in here in my safe place. Through years of living of our lives, we experience and learn things, and our perception of those experiences are what we build our house with, our view of the world, or what we would call a worldview, and our view of what is true. And over the years, this house becomes a home. It feels safe. But now as Christians, we rightly want to evangelize. We want to tell people about the gospel. We want them to know the truth of God's word and this saving grace that Jesus has given us, this salvation. We want them to let go of this subjective truth that they've kind of made up, they've built up over many years. But how do we do that? How do we deliver the gospel in such a way that we are having a conversation with somebody? How do we do that so that we can take people along with us as we share the gospel? Imagine this. I come to your house, and through my eyes, maybe I see your house looks like this. I think, I don't like your house. I think your house is horrible. And it looks, by the way, nothing like that. This is a perception that I might have. And I think, this doesn't look nice to me. And I take a look around the outside, and I peer through some windows as well, and think, it's all wrong. Don't look nice for me. I don't like the way you've laid out the furniture, the decoration, and even the configuration of the house itself. I just don't like it. and so I'm gonna bulldoze your house. I tell you all this and say it's all wrong. I think you should just knock this place down. I'll build you a new one that I think makes sense. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. But you see, when it comes to wanting people to truly receive the gospel message of truth and hope and a new life, the way we share this message is not to destroy them with facts. You see, what happens is if we're trying to think that this is only an argument, this picture clearly is probably a good representation of what we do. We bulldoze our way in, and yet what we should be doing is finding a way to be invited in to the house. We should be finding a way to be invited into the house, because we need to have the conversation. Me standing outside looking through your window and thinking that's a terrible house is not enough information for me to go on to bring my bulldozer and just knock it down, just because I feel I don't like it. The same way of what someone might believe. I may not like, and rightly so. We don't like what people believe if it's against God, rightly so. But we want to bring them to God. We want to do our work as the mission we're called to bring a message of hope. How do we do that? Even if I knock down this house, even if we give them a new shiny one that we might think is better, what people are left with is bewilderment. What people are left with is confusion. Worse still, you now live in this house without fully understanding why the old one had to be knocked down at all. And this is the risk we run in our evangelism. Just simply getting into a fact fight with someone who doesn't believe runs the risk on one hand of alienating them, but on the other hand, in many ways worse, will simply keep laying another foundation on top of the other. And what I mean by this is, what happens is if I knock down your house, I build you a new one, you have no connection with this house whatsoever. And this is belief system, is the analogy. We're looking at a belief system. I have no connection. All I have is what you've told me. All I have are facts. Now, here's what happens when it's only fact-based. Someone else comes along, states some sort of facts that they might think is facts, and say, this is who the God of the Bible really is. He's this and he's that and he's horrible and he's terrible. And they go, oh, I never thought of that either. And then they switch again, and then they go, oh, I don't like him anymore. I don't like this because this person told me this. This Christian once told me this, but now this new person's told me this other information, and now I believe that. You see what happens? People will jump from fact to fact to fact. And people always do that, by the way. They will find ways to bring another so-called fact of what they think Christianity is and who they think God is. And those people who have not been grounded properly in the Bible will just move to that next fact. And so their whole belief system shifts with one thing to another. What this means is that if someone else comes along, makes some statement, sounds true, sounds like facts, they will simply lay those new ones on top of the last. So here is what I think we need to be. I think we need to be house renovators. I think we need to be people who are willing to serve people, to come and say, I'm not here to destroy what you have, but I do want you to know the truth, and I want you to hear it, and I want you to change it. I want you to understand why you need to change what you currently have, your belief system entirely. Maybe you've seen all these shows that are just hundreds of them about renovating houses. And apart from showing my age to some degree, changing rooms, when the classic episode of Changing Rooms, they come in and they did this, and you can watch this one on YouTube. And what they did was they would change the house without any consultation whatsoever, redecorate a room or something like that. Most people go, oh, it's wonderful, it's fantastic. And one episode, they come in, and these people come in. Obviously, I spent a lot of money on this episode because I still showed it anyway. And this couple come back into their house and says, What do you think? I really don't like it. I mean, not only did the person not like it, visibly, physically, their attitude changed. They hated what had been done to their house. This is an amazing clip you'll watch. And you just think, no one would ever, we're British, right? We don't do that. We just say, yes, it's very nice, thank you. And then when they leave, we'll just redecorate the house anyway, right? But they don't do this, and they say, no. It's, oh, are you sure? Because no. And every time they're asking them, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. And they're saying, no, I really hate it. I really hate it. I really don't like it. And they kind of have to end awkwardly. So that's a shame. And the show ends because there's nowhere else to go with this particular episode. But you've seen all these things. We see it now. And what happens now is there's a consultation. What people do in these shows is they consult with the owner, and then they kind of do these things where they tell them what they're going to do, and then they do it, and it's in line with what that person wants. But it's still changed. It's changed, and it's redecorated, and it's made new all again. But there is a reason why we need to be decorators, why we need to be people that engage with people, why we need to be invited into the house to have the conversation. And it's kind of to the point I said earlier, Ephesians 4:11-14, it was he who gave some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then will we no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by waves, blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of men in their deceitful scheming. You see, that's why we need to work with people. That's why when we share the gospel, it isn't simply going to convince them, although it may temporarily convince them if we deposit some facts in their brain, but actually it's not really going to deliver the life-changing moment, the life-changing event, as it were, that people will give their life to Jesus because of those facts. Facts alone do not make people saved. And so the first step to this way of evangelism is to be genuine. If we're called to love people as God loves them, we first need to be invited. We need to listen, understand where people are and the view they have of the world. This can take a long time, by the way, and you need a lot of patience. There'll be a lot of stuff in there that you'll disagree with. They'll have all sorts of belief systems about the world, even God himself. And yet the call is not to get agitated. It is frustrating as Christians to know that we constantly go through the truth and we look at the Bible and the Holy Spirit helps us understand. And we do it, we're frustrated, but I think on the whole, we're frustrated because we want people to come to Jesus. We want them to come to God. So this might take a while, but we need to do this so we show we actually care about them. And slowly over time, I do believe this view of the world for them will change. It will change over time. The heart of the person hearing will be prepared to not only receive this message, but respond to it. And I can think, I wasn't rushed myself into believing in God. In fact, whilst I was open to an idea that God existed or a God existed, once it came to it, I can tell you now that I got more hesitant about stepping into Christianity. Meeting with a couple of guys and then them telling me and explaining and answering all my questions. But then I was kind of a little bit more hesitant because now we're not just talking about a God that exists. We're talking about the God of the Bible. We're talking about Christianity. We're talking about Jesus dying for sin. That's big stuff. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot for people to change, to become Christian, knowing that what they first believe essentially is that, yeah, there might be something. Now we're moving them to Jesus died for your sin. And if you believe in him, he will grant you eternal life. It's big stuff. Big world-changing stuff for people. We should never underestimate it. And we will come across all types of people that Jesus talks about in the parable of the sower. In Matthew 13, we see the path, the rocky ground, the thorns, the good soil. But this parable starts with something crucial. Matthew 13:19, when anyone hears the message about the kingdom, that's where it begins. That's where it all starts. We cannot force a change in those that do not understand it, those who do not let the message take root, or those who let the worries of this life overtake them. This is why we can't bulldoze our way in. Instead, we need to work with them. It might be a short space of time to convince people, but it might also be a room at a time. It might be the whole house at once, but it might be a room. It might be a wall that needs to be changed. But it will change as we deliver God's message, as we listen to where people stand, where people are, but staying in the truth of God's word, showing that actually the reason why we want you to come to Jesus, not to join a club, is to be saved. Because God wants you to be saved. And so we want that message conveyed to others. We want you to be saved because God wants you to be saved. But regardless of the time, or even if they turn to God at all, we're called to remind people of what they already know but suppress. That God exists and that they have been fearfully and wonderfully made. And I do believe this is one of the reasons why Jesus spoke in parables. What he was doing was preparing people to understand the message that they had already received. He was almost awakening something inside them. You know, we're made by God himself, so the message is already there. We know that the law is written on our hearts. He's put that in there too, the good and the bad, moral decisions that we make. But Jesus comes and kind of awakes that message, awakes that original message, but then takes it further because that's his job. He says all those things, all the laws, yes, we are culpable for not obeying them. But Jesus came who could obey them, who did obey them, who did it perfectly. And he wants you to have his righteousness so that you will not be convicted of that crime. And he would do this often with the disciples who, even to the end, failed to fully understand that Jesus came to die on the cross and even why he needed to. And there is a part of me, I think, I would look at the disciples and I think, if you had Jesus around you and they accepted he was the Messiah, you wouldn't want to let him go, right? You don't want him to leave. You don't want him to leave the place that you're living in. You don't hold on to him, wouldn't you? This is an exclusive moment in history that no one else has ever had. The disciples had this opportunity and they're saying, here is the Messiah, the one who was prophesied to come. Oh, Jesus, please stay with us. But it is right that we want as many people to come to Jesus as possible, just as God does. But let me be clear. It's not a numbers game, church. My worry, and I'm not saying anyone who's being baptized and who's coming and proclaiming Jesus and saying they're believing, I'm not saying any of that is untrue. Here's what I'm saying as a church, though, and I think as church as a whole. It's about quality over quantity. I said earlier that the problem of just laying a very loose foundation over stuff that no one really understands is that someone will come along and just kind of wash that away with some other stuff. And we can far too often be the stumbling block to that quality message of salvation if we approach this with the idea that we just need to dunk as many people as possible, get them through the swimming pool and out the other end. It doesn't pay off and it doesn't work. People need to profess, need to engage, need to carry out the action of living for Jesus. And so it's absolutely vital that we receive the message of the existence of God and the salvation of Jesus be fully read and understood, not just received. And this way we can give every single person every possible chance to understand this message of hope. I have to say that the reason I believe that moment of conviction, and you may remember it, and it, by the way, I think in many ways conviction is not a one-off. I think you do have a belief moment. You do have a kind of one of the big moments, but I think there's a constant conviction. I think there's a constant thing that the Holy Spirit is doing to us all the time. I wouldn't say reconvicting, because that would be unbiblical, because Jesus is not re-persecuted on the cross, but certainly convicted of our sin and continually convicted of what we've done. But I believe that moment of conviction, why it's such a life-changing moment, is not because we have a new knowledge of something, but I think it's because we've returned back to something familiar. When we look at Genesis, we see that humans, mankind, were with God in perfect relationship with him. And I think that's what goes on when we're convicted. I think when we come to believe, it's not like, oh, I've just got a new set of knowledge. I think it's a sudden awakening of what we already know to be true, that God exists and Jesus Christ is Lord. I think that's why it's such a special moment, why it's unmatched in any other type of event, any other type of moment. We've returned back to that which is familiar. It's like a lost memory of what was, but something that was always there, but that we've turned away from. It is a holy God who made us, who before sin we were in the perfect relationship with. But now, thanks be to Jesus Christ, God beckons us to return to a full relationship with him and be fully restored to what it once was. You see, in some ways, the message received is God kind of doing most of the work for us. God's done the heavy lifting part, and he continues to do the heavy lifting part of convicting people of their sin. And all we're called to do is come alongside and say, yeah, what about this God? What about this Jesus? And I guarantee you that one of two things will happen. One, a person will become convicted of their sin and they'll believe in Jesus and they'll repent and come to him. The other one is that they won't. But that doesn't mean we don't try. It doesn't mean that we don't continually give that message of hope to people. It doesn't mean that despite how prickly they might be, we're here to give a message of hope, of restoration, of new relationship with God, as it were. So I want to encourage you that it may seem hard to evangelize. It may seem hard at times to speak to people about God. But I think maybe remembering that God is the one doing all the work for us probably helps to make it a little bit easier for us. As long as we give the word to them as God has told us to give the word, God will do what his will has determined. Let's pray, and then we'll worship.